Welcome to the History Founder. Today's topic is the life of the Persian and Urdu Sufi poet Yaminuddin Abu al Hasan Amir Khusro. Abu al Hasan Yaminuddin Khusro, better known as Amir Khusrow Dehlvi, was an Indo-Persian Sufi singer, musician, poet and scholar who lived under the Delhi Sultanate. He was an iconic figure in the cultural history of the Indian subcontinent. He was a mystic and a spiritual disciple of Nizamuddin Auliya of Delhi, India. He wrote poetry primarily in Persian, but also in Hindi. Khusro is sometimes referred to as the voice of India or parrot of India, and has been called the father of Urdu literature. Khusro is regarded as the father of Qawwali and introduced the ghazal style of song into India, both of which still exist widely in India and Pakistan. Khusro was an expert in many styles of Persian poetry, which were developed in medieval Persia, from Khaqani's Qasidas to Nizami's Khamsa. He used 11 metrical schemes with 35 distinct divisions. He wrote in many verse forms including ghazal, masnavi, kata, rubai, dubaiti and tarkib-band. His contribution to the development of the ghazal was significant. Amir Khusro was born in 1253 in Patiali, Kasganj district, in modern-day Uttar Pradesh, India, in what was then the Delhi Sultanate, the son of Amir Saifuddin Mahmud, a man of Turkic extraction, and Bibi Daulat Naz, a native Indian mother. Amir Khusro was a Sunni Muslim. He grew up in Kesh, a small town near Samarkand in what is now Uzbekistan. When he was a young man, the region was despoiled and ravaged by Genghis Khan's invasion of Central Asia, and much of the population fled to other lands, India being a favored destination. A group of families, including that of Amir Saifuddin, left Kesh and travelled to Balkh, which was a relatively safe place. From here, they sent representations to the Sultan of distant Delhi seeking refuge and succor. This was granted, and the group then travelled to Delhi. Sultan Shamsuddin Iltutmish, ruler of Delhi, was himself a Turk like them. Indeed, he had grown up in the same region of Central Asia and had undergone somewhat similar circumstances in earlier life. This was the reason the group had turned to him in the first place. Iltutmish not only welcomed the refugees to his court, but also granted high offices and landed estates to some of them. In 1230, Amir Saifuddin was granted a fief in the district of Patiali. Amir Saifuddin married Bibi Daulat Naz, the daughter of Rawat Arz, an Indian noble and war minister of Ghiyasuddin Balban, the ninth Sultan of Delhi. Daulat Naz's family belonged to the Rajput community of modern-day Uttar Pradesh. Amir Saifuddin and Bibi Daulat Naz became the parents of 4 children, 3 sons, one of whom was Khusro, and a daughter. Amir Saifuddin Mahmud died in 1260, when Khusro was only 8 years old. Through his father's influence, he imbibed Islam and Sufism coupled with proficiency in Turkish, Persian, and Arabic languages. He was known by his sobriquet, Parrot of India, which according to the Encyclopedia of Islam compares the eloquent poet to the sweet-talking parrot, indicates his canonical status as a poet of Persian. Khusro's love and admiration for his motherland is transparent through his work. Khusro was an intelligent child. He started learning and writing poetry at the age of 9. His first divan, Tuhfa Tusair, The Gift of Childhood, containing poems composed between the ages of 16 and 18, was compiled in 1271. In 1273, when Khusro was 20 years old, his grandfather, who was reportedly 113 years old, died. After Khusro's grandfather's death, Khusro joined the army of Malik Chhajju, a nephew of the reigning Sultan, Ghiyasuddin Balban. This brought his poetry to the attention of the assembly of the royal court, where he was honored. Nasir-ud-Din Bughra Khan, the second son of Balban, was invited to listen to Khusro. He was impressed and became Khusro's patron in 1276. In 1277, Bughra Khan was then appointed ruler of Bengal, and Khusro visited him in 1279 while writing his second Divan, Wastul Hayat, the middle of life. Khusro then returned to Delhi. Balban's eldest son, Khan Muhammad, who was in Multan, arrived in Delhi, and when he heard about Khusro, he invited him to his court. Khusro then accompanied him to Multan in 1281. Multan at the time was the gateway to India and was a center of knowledge and learning. Khusro wrote that, "I tied the belt of service on my waist and put on the cap of companionship for another 5 years. I imparted luster to the water of Multan from the ocean of my wits and pleasantries." On 9th March 1285, Khan Muhammad was killed in battle while fighting Mongols who were invading the Sultanate. Khusro wrote to elegies in grief of his death. In 1287, Khusro travelled to Awadh with another of his patrons, Amir Ali Hatim. At the age of 80, Balban called his second son Bughra Khan back from Bengal, but Bughra Khan refused. After Balban's death in 1287, his grandson Muizuddin Kekabad, Bughra Khan's son, was made the Sultan of Delhi at the age of 17. Khusro remained in Kekabad's service for 2 years, from 1287 to 1288. In 1288, Khusro finished his first Masnavi, Kiranu-Sadain, Meeting of the Two Auspicious Stars, which was about Bughra Khan meeting his son Muizuddin Kekabad after a long enmity. After Kekabad suffered a stroke in 1290, nobles appointed his 3-year-old son Shamsuddin Kayumaz as Sultan. A Turko-Afghan named Jalaluddin Firuz Khalji then marched on Delhi, killed Kekabad, and became Sultan, thus ending the Mamluk dynasty of the Delhi Sultanate and starting the Khalji dynasty. Jalaluddin Firuz Khalji appreciated poetry and invited many poets to his court. Khusro was honored and respected in his court and was given the title Amir. He was given the job of Mushaftar. Court life made Khusro focus more on his literary works. Khusro's ghazals, which he composed in quick succession, were set to music and were sung by singing girls every night before the Sultan. Khusro writes about Jalaluddin Firuz. "The king of the world Jalaluddin, in reward for my infinite pain, which I undertook in composing verses, bestowed upon me an unimaginable treasure of wealth." In 1290, Khusro completed his second Masnavi, Miftahul Futuh, Key to the Victories, in praise of Jalaluddin Firoz's victories. In 1294, Khusro completed his third Divan, Ghuratul Kamal, the Prime of Perfection, which consisted of poems composed between the ages of 34 and 41. After Jalaluddin Firoz, Alauddin Khalji ascended to the throne of Delhi in 1296. Khusro wrote the Khajainul Futuh, the Treasures of Victory, recording Alauddin's construction works, wars, and administrative services. He then composed a Khamsa, quintet, with 5 Masnavis, known as Khamsa-i Khusro, Khamsa of Khusro, completing it in 1298. The Khamsa emulated that of the earlier poet of Persian epics, Nizami Ganjavi. The first Masnavi in the Khamsa was Matla-ul-Anwar, Rising Place of Lights, consisting of 3,310 verses, completed in 15 days with ethical and Sufi themes. The second Masnavi, Khusro Shireen, consisted of 4,000 verses. The third Masnavi, Laila Majnu, was a romance. The fourth voluminous Masnavi was Ain-i Sikandari, which narrated the heroic deeds of Alexander the Great in 4,500 verses. The fifth Masnavi was Hasht Bihisht, which was based on legends about Bahramvi, the 15th king of the Sasaniya Empire. All these works made Khusro a leading luminary in the world of poetry. Alauddin Khalji was highly pleased with his work and rewarded him handsomely. When Alauddin's son and future successor Qutbuddin Mubarak Shah Khalji was born, Khusro prepared the horoscope of Mubarak Shah Khalji, in which certain predictions were made. This horoscope is included in the Masnavi Sakyana. In 1300, when Khusro was 47 years old, his mother and brother died. He wrote these lines in their honor. A double radiance left my star this year. Gone are my brother and my mother. My two full moons have set and ceased to shine. In one short week through this luck of mine. Khusro's homage to his mother on her death was, wherever the dust of your feet is found is like a relic of paradise for me. In 1310, Khusro became a disciple of Sufi saint of the Chishti order, Nizamuddin Auliya. In 1315, Khusro completed the romantic Masnavi Deval Rani Khizar Khan about the marriage of the Waghela princess Deval Rani to Khizar Khan, one of Alauddin Khalji's sons. After Alauddin Khalji's death in 1316, his son Qutbuddin Mubarak Shah Khalji became the Sultan of Delhi. Khusro wrote a Masnavi on Mubarak Shah Khalji called New Sipir, Nine Skies, which described the events of Mubarak Shah Khalji's reign. He classified his poetry in 9 chapters, each part of which is considered a sky. In the 3rd chapter, he wrote a vivid account of India and its environment, seasons, flora and fauna, cultures, scholars, etc. He wrote another book during Mubarak Shah Khalji's reign by name of Ijaz-e Khusrawi, The Miracles of Khusro, which consisted of 5 volumes. In 1319 he wrote Afzal ul Fawaid, Greatest of Blessings, a work of prose that contained the teachings of Nizamuddin Auliya. In 1321 Khusro began to write a historic Masnavi named Tughlaq Nama, Book of the Tughlaqs, about the reign of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq and that of other Tughlaq rulers. Khusro is credited with fusing the Persian, Arabic, Turkic, and Indian singing traditions in the late 13th century to create Qawwali, a form of Sufi devotional song. Khusro's disciples who specialized in Qawwali singing were later classified as Qawwals. They sang only Muslim devotional songs, and Qalwans, they sang mundane songs in the Qawwali style. Khusro is credited for the invention of the sitar. At the time, there were many versions of the veena in India. He rechristened the 3-stringed Tritantri veena as a sahtar, Persian for 3-stringed, which eventually became known as the sitar. Amir Khusro was a prolific classical poet associated with the royal courts of more than 7 rulers of the Delhi Sultanate. He wrote many playful riddles, songs and legends which have become a part of popular culture in South Asia. His riddles are one of the most popular forms of Hindavi poetry today. Khusro wrote primarily in Persian. Many Hindustani, historically known as Hindavi, verses are attributed to him, since there is no evidence for their composition by Khusro before the 18th century. Khusro died in October 1325, 6 months after the death of Nizamuddin Auliya. Khusro's tomb is next to that of his spiritual master in the Nizamuddin Dargah in Delhi. Nihayatul Kamal, the zenith of perfection, was compiled probably a few weeks before his death.